She could have said one sentence, "I'm his wife." That was all. Everything would have ended there. But she didn't. For 11 months, she walked through that hotel as a stranger, folding napkins, setting water glasses, pressing her back against the wall like she was part of the furniture. Not because she didn't matter to him, because she mattered too much. Because if his father ever found out, it wouldn't destroy her, it would destroy him. And she loved him enough to become no one, just so he could keep being someone. But now his father is here, and he's brought a contract, another woman's name printed beside his son's. He's sitting at the head of that table saying, "Sign it, or I'll find the certificate myself." So what did he do? Did he sign it? Did he let her go? Or did he do something no one was ready for? Welcome to Her Silent Room. You're listening to another story, so let's get into it. The conference room smelled like furniture polish and old leather. The girl moved along the edge of the table, placing each glass exactly 2 inches from the notepad, exactly centered on the coaster. She'd been shown once. She didn't need to be shown again. The staff briefing hadn't started. 3 managers sat along the far side, scrolling through tablets. A woman from housekeeping leaned in the doorway, talking into the hallway. No one watched the new hire arrange the water glasses. That was the job. Useful enough to stay, invisible enough not to interrupt. She set the final glass down and stepped back to the wall. The door at the head of the room opened. The owner walked in without greeting anyone. Jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm, a watch too expensive for how simple it looked. He placed a folder on the table and pulled out his chair. The room tightened. Conversations shortened. The housekeeping woman straightened and found her seat. The girl pressed her shoulder blades against the wall and held her hands in front of her. He sat, opened the folder, read. Then, without lifting his chin, his eyes shifted, not toward the managers, not toward the agenda, but sideways, along the wall, until they found her. It lasted less than 2 seconds. She didn't move, didn't look away, didn't look at him either. Her gaze stayed fixed on the middle distance, like someone trained to exist without reacting. He returned to the folder. The briefing began. Numbers, occupancy percentages, staffing changes. She stood still while voices moved around the room. Twice, the manager nearest her gestured in her direction without acknowledging her. Once about uniforms, once about banquet setup schedules. She was referenced the way someone references furniture that's been recently rearranged. 12 minutes in, a glass near the far end of the table tipped sideways from an elbow, and water crept across the wood toward the housekeeping woman's open folder. The girl moved immediately, napkin from the service tray, pressure on the spill, glass upright, replacement poured before the woman had fully reacted. The owner watched the entire sequence, not the spill, not the rescue. Her. The way her wrist rotated the glass upright, efficient, practiced, no hesitation. The way she didn't apologize, because she hadn't caused it. The way she stepped back to the wall as if nothing had happened. The way her breathing didn't change. The housekeeping manager muttered something about the new girl being quick. The operations manager glanced up, then looked back down. No one else noticed. But the owner's hand had stopped on the page. He wasn't reading anymore. He was still, not frozen, still, in the way someone becomes still when they've recognized something they expected to find but hoped they wouldn't. The girl adjusted her stance against the wall. One foot shifted slightly. Her eyes swept the room in a practiced arc, glasses, notepads, door, and passed over him without pausing. Without pausing, not avoiding, not engaging. Passing over him the way someone passes over a thing they've already mapped completely and decided not to look at twice. The briefing ended at 9:15. Managers filed out. The owner stayed behind, turning a page that didn't need turning. She collected the glasses. He didn't look up again. But when she reached for the glass nearest his hand, his fingers shifted, 2 inches to the right, clearing her path before she asked. She didn't thank him. She didn't pause. She placed the glass on her tray and carried it out. In the hallway, the housekeeping manager touched her elbow. "He doesn't usually stay after briefings." The girl balanced the tray and said nothing. "Just so you know," the woman added, quieter. She walked toward the service kitchen. The weight of the tray didn't change, but something behind her sternum shifted. A small, dense awareness that she'd been watched by someone who wasn't evaluating whether she could do the job. He already knew. By the fourth day, she had memorized every route through the hotel that avoided the main lobby. Service corridors, staff elevators, the loading hallway behind the kitchen that smelled like industrial soap and damp linen. She moved through the building like water, finding cracks in tile. Present everywhere, visible nowhere. It didn't matter. The owner found her anyway. Not physically. He didn't follow or appear in doorways. But his decisions kept arriving just ahead of her, reshaping her day before she lived it. On Tuesday, she was assigned to the VIP floor for a private dinner. 40 minutes before the shift, the assignment changed. She was moved to the second-floor terrace. Easier service, fewer guests, a client list that didn't include the man who'd grabbed a waitress's arm at last month's gala. The change came without explanation, a clipboard correction, a shrug that said it came from above. She looked at the new assignment. She didn't ask why. On Wednesday, a supply delivery error left the kitchen short-staffed. 3 service employees were pulled to unload crates from the truck in the loading bay. Her name was on the list. 10 minutes later, it wasn't. A floor supervisor told her she'd been reassigned to napkin folding in the second ballroom. Alone, climate-controlled, no lifting. She folded napkins for 3 hours without complaint. On Thursday, it happened again. A guest in the restaurant lounge raised his voice at a server over a cocktail order. The owner appeared, not running, not rushing, simply existing in the space between the man's hand and the bar counter, as if he'd always been standing there. He spoke to the guest, low voice, short sentences. The guest sat down. The server exhaled, and the girl, clearing a table 6 feet away, watched the entire intervention without changing her posture. That was the detail that snagged, not his behavior, hers. The waitress who'd been yelled at pressed her back to the service station afterward, shaking. The bartender muttered that the boss never stepped in like that for anyone. A busboy leaned toward another and whispered, low enough to seem private, loud enough to travel. "He's doing it again. 3rd time this week." The girl set the cleared plates on her tray, straightened a fork, lifted the tray, and walked toward the kitchen without looking at any of them. She didn't flinch. She didn't look grateful. She didn't glance toward the owner, who still stood near the bar, with one hand resting on the counter, watching the guest finish his drink in cooperative silence. It wasn't coldness. Coldness requires effort. This was something else. The absence of surprise. As if the intervention had been expected. As if she'd already calculated how far the situation would escalate before something, or someone, interrupted it. The housekeeping manager noticed. She had begun watching the girl the way people watch weather systems. Not because they can control what's coming, but because the pattern is too consistent to ignore. "Doesn't it bother you?" she asked Thursday evening near the staff lockers. The girl pulled her jacket from the hook. "What?" "The way he—" The woman stopped, chose another word. "The reassignments. I go where I'm told." "That's not what I asked." The girl zipped her jacket. Her fingers were steady. Her eyes didn't drift toward the hallway where the owner's office light still burned at 8:40. She shouldered her bag and left through the staff exit without answering. In the parking lot, the overhead light near the employee entrance had been replaced. It had flickered for 2 weeks. Maintenance hadn't prioritized it. Now it burned steady and white, illuminating the 30 feet between the door and the bus stop bench. She stood beneath it and waited. She didn't look up at the light, didn't check who ordered it fixed. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and stared at the road. The steadiness in her posture wasn't the kind that comes from feeling safe. It was the kind that comes from knowing exactly what shape the safety is taking, and choosing, carefully and deliberately, without gratitude, not to acknowledge its source. Inside the hotel, the owner stood at his office window. The angle was wrong to see the parking lot. He wasn't trying. His hand rested against the glass. His reflection stared back with an expression that didn't belong on a man watching an employee leave for the night. It belonged to someone watching a door he'd left open, wondering how long before she decided to close it. Friday came with a banquet. The largest ballroom had been converted for a corporate anniversary. 200 guests, tiered seating, a stage draped in navy fabric that cost more per yard than she earned in a shift. Every server was pulled into rotation. Assignments were posted at noon. Stations, sections, timing grids. Her name sat in Section C, center floor, high visibility. The kind of station reserved for experienced servers who could carry 4 plates without looking down. She read it, said nothing, pinned her hair tighter, and started prep. By 6 o'clock, the ballroom hummed with setup noise, silverware against linen, ice rattling into bins, chairs scraping into rows. The banquet manager paced the perimeter, barking adjustments. The housekeeping manager moved between tables, confirming centerpieces. Everyone was visible, except the owner. His office door had been closed since morning. No briefing, no walkthrough, no quiet redirections. The clipboard stayed as posted. Section C remained hers. She noticed his absence the way someone notices a sound that stops. Not immediately, but with a slow widening of internal silence. She set glasses along her station. Her hands stayed steady, but her rhythm slowed by a fraction. 1 glass placed. A pause. Another glass. Another pause. As if she were listening for something between the clinks. The banquet began at 7:30. Guests filtered in wearing dark suits and careful smiles. She moved through Section C with mechanical precision. Plates delivered, glasses filled, empty dishes cleared before anyone needed to signal. She was good at this. Better than her training level suggested. Better than anyone had bothered to ask. At 8:15, a man at table 9 leaned back and caught her wrist as she reached for his bread plate. Not hard, not violent. The casual grip of someone who touches service workers the way they touch elevator buttons, without registering that the surface is alive. Sweetheart. He didn't look at her face. Another bourbon. Neat. She stopped. Her tray stayed level. Her fingers didn't tighten. She waited for the grip to release. It didn't. She angled her body slightly, a practiced rotation that slipped her wrist free without yanking, without scene, without sound. Right away, sir. She walked toward the bar. No one intervened. The busboy near the kitchen entrance had seen it. He glanced toward the ballroom entrance, then toward the hallway leading to the owner's office. His eyebrows lifted, then dropped. He said nothing, but his expression carried the sentence he didn't speak. Where is he? The housekeeping manager saw it too. She stood near the east wall with a replacement centerpiece in her hands, watching the girl cross the ballroom floor with the tray perfectly balanced and her face perfectly empty. The woman's mouth tightened, not at the guest, at the absence. She set the centerpiece down harder than necessary and looked at the bartender, who was already pouring the bourbon without being told, because he'd been watching her station since 8 o'clock. Because everyone had been watching. Not for what would happen, for who would stop it. Nobody came. She delivered the bourbon. The man at table 9 took it without acknowledgement. She returned to her station and continued clearing plates. And for the first time in 5 days, the protective architecture that had been quietly rearranging her life was gone. No reassignment, no redirection, no quiet figure appearing between her and the sharp edges of the building. The space where intervention should have been sat open and cold. The staff felt it, not as relief but as exposure, as if someone had removed a wall they hadn't known was structural. After the main course, the housekeeping manager found her in the service corridor, restocking napkins. He's not here tonight. She folded a napkin into thirds. I noticed. You noticed. The woman leaned against the wall, crossed her arms. You're the only one who doesn't seem bothered. Her hands paused for half a second, not long enough to be a reaction, long enough to be a decision about whether to have one. Should I be? The housekeeping manager studied her hands. The napkin fold resumed at exactly the same speed, the same pressure, as if the conversation hadn't touched anything inside her. "The other girls talk," the woman said carefully, "about why he watches you, about why things keep changing around you. Things change around everyone. Not like this, not for someone who's been here 8 days." She set the finished napkin on the stack, picked up another. Her eyes didn't lift. "What do they think?" she asked. The question wasn't curious. It was navigational. The voice of someone mapping where a rumor had traveled so she could calculate how far to stand from its center. "They think you knew him before." The fold stopped. 1 second. 2. Then her fingers resumed. The napkin took shape. She said nothing, but the silence was wrong. Not defensive, not surprised. The silence of someone who heard the right answer spoken for the wrong reason and couldn't correct it without breaking something she wasn't ready to break. The housekeeping manager waited. She finished the napkin, added it to the stack, picked up the tray. "They can think what they want," she said. She walked back toward the ballroom. The housekeeping manager didn't follow, but something had shifted in her expression. She wasn't wondering if the girl knew the owner anymore. She was wondering why the girl was pretending she didn't. The old man arrived on a Monday. No announcement, no itinerary. A black car appeared under the front awning at 10 in the morning. By 10:03, the lobby staff had straightened their posture, lowered their voices, and communicated his presence through the building using nothing but glances in the speed of their footsteps. The girl was restocking the second-floor linen station when the housekeeping manager appeared at the end of the hallway, slightly out of breath. "The founder is here." She set a folded towel on the shelf. "Okay." "His father." The woman said it as if the word required emphasis, as if father explained something the title founder had not. She picked up another towel. "I know who he is." The housekeeping manager opened her mouth, then closed it. The tone hadn't been sharp, it had been flat. "I know who he is," spoken the way someone says, "I know where the stairs are." Downstairs, the old man moved through the lobby like he still owned every square foot. Technically, he did. His name remained on the holding company. His signature was still required for capital decisions above a threshold no one discussed out loud. The owner met him at the elevator bank. They didn't embrace. The old man looked at his son the way an architect looks at a building that followed the plans but missed the intent. They disappeared into the office. The door closed. The hallway cleared within minutes, not because anyone was told to leave, but because proximity to that door, when both men were inside, carried a weight the staff had learned to measure by instinct. Lunch was brought in, then coffee, then nothing for 2 hours. At 3 o'clock, the operations manager gathered senior staff in the small conference room and explained, without explaining, that the founder would be evaluating the hotel's performance through the week. Structural review, financial benchmarking, standard family governance. The words were corporate. The delivery was calm. No one believed this was routine. He hadn't visited in 14 months. The last time he came, 2 department heads were replaced before Friday. The girl wasn't in the meeting. She was clearing lunch service on the terrace when the owner stepped through the glass doors and stopped at the railing, his back to the dining area. She didn't stop working. He didn't turn around. But his right hand moved to his chest, not his pocket, not his collar. The space between, where his shirt met the second button, where fabric gathered just enough to conceal something flat resting against his sternum. His fingers pressed there briefly, the way someone presses a bruise to confirm it still hurts. Then his hand dropped. Her eyes tracked the movement. Not her head, her eyes. She saw it the way someone sees a word they've read 1,000 times, and for the first time, her rhythm broke openly. The plate in her hand hovered over the tray for a full second before she set it down. She turned away from him, not casually, deliberately. A controlled rotation that put her back toward the railing and her face toward the empty dining tables, where no one could see what her expression was doing. He remained there another 30 seconds. Then he walked inside without speaking. That evening, the old man appeared in the restaurant during dinner service. He didn't eat. He sat in the corner booth with a glass of water and watched the operation the way a surgeon watches a student perform a procedure, tracking not results, but technique. Not outcomes, but habits. His gaze moved from server to server, measuring something invisible. It found her at 7:40. She carried a tray of dessert plates toward table 12. He watched her cross the floor, his head tilted, a small mechanical adjustment, like a lens refocusing. He watched the efficiency, the invisible quality of her service. Then his eyes moved to the far wall. His son stood near the host station reviewing a seating chart he didn't need to review. Something in the old man's expression hardened, not anger, recognition. He watched his son not watching her. He watched the precision of that avoidance, how the owner angled his body away from her path, how his attention distributed itself across every server except the one moving with the most skill, how the gap between them maintained exactly the same distance no matter where either stood. The old man set his glass down, pulled out his phone, typed a message. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without looking at either of them again. She delivered the dessert plates. Her hands were steady, but when she returned to the service station, the bartender caught her eye and held it. Not with suspicion, not with gossip, but with the caution of someone who has watched a fuse burn long enough to know how much wire is left. His father watched you for 10 minutes. I was working. He wasn't watching you work. The bartender polished a glass already clean. He was watching his son not watch you. Her jaw tightened, a micro-movement, nearly invisible. Gone before he could confirm he'd seen it. She picked up her tray and turned toward the floor. Behind her, in the corridor leading to the guest suites, the old man was already on the phone. His voice was low, but one word carried through the gap in the service door. Arrangement. And somewhere on the restaurant floor, the owner set down the seating chart, placed both palms flat on the host station, and looked, for the first time that evening, directly at her. She didn't look back. Not because she didn't feel it, because they both knew that looking back now would be the thing that ended everything. The arrangement materialized on Wednesday, presented in the small conference room, the same room where she once placed water glasses 2 inches from the notepads. 3 chairs occupied, the old man at the head, the owner across from him, and a woman's name printed on a folder between them like a property deed. She wasn't in the room. She was 2 floors above, changing linens in suite 614, pulling fitted sheets tight across mattress corners with the kind of force that suggested she already knew what was happening below. The arrangement was simple. The old man's word made it sound generous, a merger between families, a woman from an allied hospitality group, educated, visible, architecturally correct for the life he designed for his son. The wedding would consolidate 2 brands. The timeline was 8 weeks. The owner listened with his hands folded on the table. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He didn't touch his chest. "You've had time," the old man said. The sentence wasn't about the arrangement. It was about something older, patience extended and now being retracted. "I understand. Do you?" The old man opened the folder. Photographs, financial projections, a biography written in the third person as if she were a hotel being appraised for acquisition, because understanding and agreeing are different things, and I've tolerated the gap between them long enough. The owner looked at the folder. His expression didn't change, but his thumb moved, pressing against the inside of his left ring finger, rubbing the base where a band would sit if worn visibly. "I'll review it. You'll sign it." Silence held the room for 4 seconds. Then he closed the folder, stood, and walked out. He didn't go to his office. He went to the 6th floor. She was in the hallway outside suite 614, loading a linen cart. She saw him before he reached her, his reflection in the polished fire door at the corridor's end. She didn't turn. Her hands kept folding. He stopped 6 feet behind her, close enough to speak without raising his voice, far enough that anyone near the elevator bank would see distance, not intimacy. He brought a name. Her hands stopped folding. 1 second. Her back remained turned, her spine straight. The stillness in her shoulders wasn't surprise. It was processing, a calculation running behind her ribs, measuring the weight of the next sentence before allowing it to exist. I know. She resumed folding. The housekeeping manager heard it from the operations manager an hour ago. I haven't agreed. You will. The words landed without inflection, not accusation, not resignation. Fact. Delivered with the flat certainty of someone who had mapped this exact conversation months ago and already knew every exit was sealed. He stepped closer. 5 feet now. I won't sign something that... Don't. She turned. The look on her face stopped him more completely than a locked door. Not anger, not pain. Control. The kind of control that costs everything to maintain and looks, from the outside, like nothing is happening at all. Her eyes were dry, her jaw set. Her hands hung at her sides holding a pillowcase. The ordinariness of it against the magnitude of the moment made the air feel thin. Don't say it here, she said. Quiet. Final. Don't say it where someone can hear you choose me over what he built. The word choose hung between them. Not romantic, structural. A load-bearing word revealing, for the first time, the direction of the weight she had been carrying. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid for him. Every reassignment she absorbed without complaint. Every intervention she refused to acknowledge. Every time she walked past him without looking, folded napkins instead of answering questions, kept her name out of his mouth and his attention out of public view. It hadn't been distance. It had been architecture, a structure built to prevent anyone from connecting his decisions to her presence, because the moment that connection became visible, it wouldn't cost her. It would cost him. He stood in the hallway. Something behind his expression collapsed. Not dramatically, not visibly, the way a foundation shifts beneath a building that remains standing. He looked at the pillowcase in her hand, at her pressed uniform, at the corridor that smelled like bleach and clean cotton. The most important person in his life stood under fluorescent lights holding hotel linens and asking him, without asking, to let her remain invisible. His hand moved to his chest again. Second button. Fabric gathered, something flat against his sternum. She saw it. Her eyes dropped to his hand, then closed once, a blink half a second longer than necessary. Go back downstairs, she said. Review the folder. Tell him you're considering it. And then what? She opened her eyes, looked at him with something that wasn't love, or wasn't only love, but the exhaustion of someone who has protected a thing so carefully for so long that the protection has become indistinguishable from the thing itself. And then nothing changes, she said. That's the whole point. She turned back to the linen cart. He stood there 3 more seconds. Then he walked toward the elevator. Neither looked at the other. The hallway returned to silence. Not empty. Full. Held. Too heavy to carry in front of witnesses. The contracts arrived Friday morning. 3 copies. Red tabs. The small conference room prepared like a surgical theater. Sterile. Positioned. Cleared of distraction. The old man sat at the head of the table at 9 sharp. The folder from Wednesday replaced by a thicker one, bound at the spine, the bride's name printed beside his son's. The owner arrived at 9:12, 12 minutes late. Not accidental, not defiant. The lateness of someone who needed every extra second to finish building something inside himself that would hold. He sat, didn't open the contracts. The old man didn't push them forward, not yet. He studied his son's face with diagnostic patience. 40 years of reading rooms, deals, the distance between what people say and what they protect. Where is she? The owner's expression didn't shift. Who? The girl on the 6th floor. The one you won't look at. The one your staff whispers about because you've restructured half your operational schedule around her safety. The old man's voice was level, precise, a scalpel, not a hammer. Where is she right now? Silence. I had her investigated on Tuesday. He opened a thinner, unmarked folder. She has no employment history before this hotel. No family contacts on file. No emergency contact listed. No residential lease under her name. A page turned. But she has a marriage certificate. Filed 11 months ago, county clerk's office, downtown jurisdiction. The owner didn't blink. The groom's name is redacted on the public filing. Privacy request. Legal. Expensive. The folder closed. The kind of expensive a girl who folds napkins for $14 an hour cannot afford. The room held its breath. Outside the glass wall, the corridor was empty, cleared by instinct. The owner looked at the contracts, at the red tabs, at his father's hands resting on the table, with the stillness of someone who had already decided the outcome and was waiting for resistance to exhaust itself. "Sign the arrangement," the old man said, "or I'll find the unredacted certificate myself. And when I do, I won't be the only one who knows." The owner's hand moved, not toward the contracts, toward the space between them, a neutral inch of mahogany belonging to neither document. And then he did something the old man did not expect. He didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't defend her, didn't deny the certificate. He leaned back in his chair. "Then find it." The old man's composure fractured, barely. A hairline crack in the slight parting of his lips, the micro-adjustment of his weight. "You understand what that means." "I understand exactly what it means." His voice was quiet, not defeated, not defiant. The voice of someone who had carried a specific weight for 11 months and had just, carefully, irreversibly, set it down. "It means you'll find my name." The old man went still. "It means you'll find a date from before she ever walked into this building, before the staffing change, before the reassignments." His ring finger, there, visibly bare, pressed against the wood. "It means she's been working here as a stranger because I asked her to, because you would have made her disappear before anyone learned her last name. And she agreed because she understood that the only way to stay near me without destroying what you built was to let everyone believe she was no one." The old man stared. The contracts remained untouched. "She refused the arrangement," the owner said, "because she couldn't accept a deal for something she already has." The door opened. She stood in the frame, not entering, not retreating, holding a service tray she had carried from the second floor, as if delivering water, as if routine, as if coincidence, as if 11 months of invisibility had not led to this exact doorway at this exact second. She looked at the old man, then the contracts, then at him. For the first time since the story began, she held his gaze. No passing arc, no calculation, no measurement of who was watching. The old man looked between them. His hand moved toward the thin folder, stopped. She set the tray on the side table, 3 glasses of water, perfectly placed. Then she waited, not for permission, not for rescue, with the posture of someone who had decided that being seen was worth whatever it destroyed. The old man did not speak for a long time. The conference room held them in a geometry that had existed for 11 months, without occupying the same physical space. Father at the head, son across, girl in the doorway with water glasses and a secret never meant to be hers. He opened the thin folder, looked at the marriage certificate, the redacted line, then at his son's hand pressed flat on the table. His eyes moved to her. She stood still, not performing, not weaponizing. The stillness of someone who had spent 11 months building a discipline so complete that its removal left nothing to hide behind. Her hands were empty, the tray set aside, the glasses delivered. No reason to be in the room except the truth. His gaze dropped to her left hand. Clean fingers, no ring, no tan line, no evidence. But his attention lingered. Something shifted in his expression, not softening, not hardening, recalibrating. The thing he had tried to prevent had already happened, in a tense he hadn't monitored. He looked at the contracts, 3 copies, red tabs, a bride's name printed beside his son's. He closed the folder, not with force, not with resignation, with mechanical precision, filed under finished. No approval, no forgiveness, only recognition that the architecture he built had been quietly, structurally, irreversibly bypassed. He stood, buttoned his jacket, walked toward the door. She stepped aside. As he passed, he paused, not turning, not looking, stopping beside her like someone stopping beside a wall just realized to be load-bearing. "How long were you going to do this?" he said, not to his son, to her. She didn't hesitate. As long as it took. His jaw moved once, then he walked out. His footsteps carried down the corridor. The door remained open, the way doors remain open when closing them would mean admitting what happened inside was real. The owner hadn't moved. He sat with his palm flat against the table. She stood in the doorway. For several seconds, neither adjusted to the new condition. The discipline was still running. 11 months of calibrated distance doesn't dissolve because someone leaves a room. She looked at the water glasses she had placed. 3 glasses, 2 inches from the edge. He watched her looking at them. Then his hand moved, not to his chest, not to the button where the ring had rested against his sternum for 11 months, to the button itself. He unfastened it, reached beneath the fabric, pulled out a thin chain. On the chain, a band. Simple, tungsten-colored, warm from his skin. He didn't put it on. He held it in his open palm, looked at her. She crossed the room, not quickly, not slowly. The way someone crosses a room when the distance has been measured so many times in the mind that the body already knows the steps. She stopped at the table's edge, looked at the ring in his hand, looked at his face, openly, fully, without the practiced arc that had carried her gaze past him for 11 months. Her fingers closed over his palm, not taking the ring, holding his hand around it. "You moved your fingers," she said quietly. "That first morning, when I reached for the glass near your hand. You moved before I asked." He looked at her. "You always move before I ask." He turned his hand beneath hers, the ring pressed between their palms, not worn, not hidden, just held, present. A small, dense circle of metal that had lived against his heartbeat for 11 months, while she carried its weight in silence, and he carried its absence on his hand. The conference room was quiet. The contracts sat unsigned. The water glasses stood in a row, 2 inches from the edge, perfectly placed by someone who had never once needed to be taught where things belonged. She didn't let go of his hand. He didn't ask her to.